He actually told Wes, okay, I'll give you that one. You're right. The Gospel of Barnabas, forgery. Billy admitted, oh, it's a forgery. And then now he's talking about all these more ancient stuff, more complicated stuff, and then just disagreeing with the facts that are out there. We just read it. He made claims. There's going to be a whole conversation about creation. And I love this conversation. I enjoyed quite a bit because Billy loves this stuff. Ancient cultures, Anunnaki, all this stuff, right? And he makes very bold claims, very, very bold claims. And we'll pull up the actual text and look at it.
Like that. So let's go into the
Sorry, he's going to go to the Old Testament.
Old Testament a little bit. Predominantly, from my research, I discovered that a lot of information from the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation is a lot of the, in Genesis, a lot of the creation story that comes into Genesis. Not all of it, but because obviously it's a smaller, Genesis is a much smaller version of a much bigger story. But it's literally almost word for word from the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation, the epic of Atrahasis.
So the claim is it's word for word from the Enuma Elish. Some of you guys don't know what the Enuma Elish is. Those of us who went to Bible college had to study this stuff. When we studied the Old Testament, we read these texts. We're familiar with it. We know the stories. But again, you can find all of this stuff online. And we'll pull it up and look at it. The claim is it's copied word for word, almost word for word. It's copied. We're going to see whether it's copied word for word. I'm going to put it in front of you. Some of you guys who just really love Billy Carson, I want you to look at it in comparison and see if it is. And if it's not, why is he lying? He's either ridiculously ignorant, which means you don't need to listen to him, or he's intentionally lying, which means you don't need to listen to him. Those are your options. So he's quoted the Gospel of Barnabas. Wes took it down. He's like, cool, I'll give you that, right? He talked about the Sinai Bible. Wes gave him a response. He said, okay, I'll give you that. Every claim he's made, he's been proven to be wrong about. If somebody can't do 1 hour of research to find out why he's wrong about these stuff, why would you trust them on more outlandish claims, like the stuff you see in the Bible, in the Old Testament, being copied from the Enuma Elish? Why would you trust them on aliens seeding things and these texts proving that and all the other claims he has? And he sells this to you, you guys. He wants money for this from you, and you give him the money. Why? If you can't get simple facts right, if he can't do 30 minutes of research to find out that some of the texts he keeps quoting on everywhere he goes are 14th century fabrications, why would you trust him on this stuff? Let's let him talk.
Is also there in the Old Testament. Several other tablets as well, quoted upon Hammurabi and a few others, have made it into that text. Sumerian cylinder scrolls that talk about the creation story. Again, the creation story in the epic of Atrahasis. And so we tend to see this copying of ancient tablets, text, and scriptures, even some into the biblical text. Meaning that my point here is that I think a lot of people are saying that this information was written in real time. A lot of people believe that. If you ask the average person, they really believe that. But a lot of this information is just copied from older tablets and texts from an earlier date. That's what I found. That it's made it into the canonized Bible, but they never reference that they got it from any other ancient texts and tablets that have to do with a totally different civilization with totally different religious beliefs.
Have you read the Enuma Elish?
I've done lectures.
Okay, notice, have you read the Enuma Elish? Yes, I've done lectures on it, which means he should know it well. If you do lectures on it, you better know something. Wes asks him to summarize it. Bear through it, guys. Bear through his summary.
Sure. Do you mind summarizing the content of the creation account in the Enuma Elish for us?
Sure. The Enuma Elish is a very ancient text discovered in the Library of Ashurbanipal. And the summary of it is that it really gives us an account, which is crazy, an astronomical account of the creation of our solar system. It talks about planets and moons gaining specific orbits around the sun. It talks about a huge planet named Tiamat, 46 times larger than Earth. Earth didn't exist at the time that this, according to the author of this text, which is pretty interesting. And then there talks about a nemesis of sorts. In the original version, it's called Nibiru, but in a more recent version, still thousands of years old, the name was changed to Marduk. Marduk is in the Jewish American Library, in the biblical text, in the Torah, and so forth. Very popular figure in ancient times in the religious books and texts. Marduk wanted to be the destroyer, so Marduk is the one that during its next orbit towards Tiamat, crashed into Tiamat and destroyed Tiamat. A huge chunk of it swung away, recoalesced, taking the water, land, and organic material, which basically recoalesced as our planet here, Earth, and the rest of it broke up into pieces. Some of it turned into the asteroid belt. Excuse me. Other parts of it were thrown towards the sun, and some were thrown towards the inner Oort cloud, towards the outer edge of the solar system. Um, this planet or this moonlet that orbited supposedly a brown dwarf, based on the description of it, gained a very strange orbit around our sun. And we have the scientific evidence now also to match with NASA's data, where we see that Saturn and I believe Neptune switch places. Uranus is flipped on its side, and that's more evidence that something came through our solar system in ancient times and gravitationally really tugged at planets here and switched up their orbits and even pulled the axis of a planet on its own side, where the equator is now running north and south. So a little bit of modern astrophysics kind of backs up what this ancient text is saying. But the Enuma Elish also then begins to talk about the fact that these beings, it kind of cuts into the fact that these beings, are on Earth and at some point begin to engage mankind. In other words, they didn't create people from scratch, but they engaged the existing hominid and began to utilize us as workers for their workforce. In the Atrahasis epic, you see a much similar story, slightly later date period, but still thousands of years old, the epic of Atrahasis. And we see a very similar story. And we see where the sons of God literally came down to Earth. They came from Mars, according to this text, if you read the translation of the planet Mars and to English. And then they went to battle. They were going to go to battle in South Africa against Enki and Lil and Anu. And they come to terms without going to battle. They argued that they needed women, human women, believe it or not. And they also wanted a workforce. They didn't want to continue to do the labor. They were cleaning out the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, digging canals, building cities on Earth, and according to the text on Mars, not according to me. And a decision was made by Enki and Anu and Enlil to allow this experiment to happen, where they would take the existing hominid here. They would slay one of the gods, meaning that they would, in my opinion, that doesn't mean that they're going to kill it, but somehow some type of genetic modification or manipulation, in my personal opinion, that's my personal hypothesis. But in the end, it ends up being that human beings are now doing a lot of this labor and worshiping these people as gods, as they, my personal opinion, masqueraded as gods. A lot of stories there, parallel stories that you see in the Bible, even the Tower of Babel incident, and many other crazy stories that are in the Bible. You can find a lot of those true stories in the ancient texts, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, where you can find the true story of Noah. They found the Noah tablet to give him instructions on how to build the ark. It wasn't a big boat. It was a round disc that he built with the sections cut up on the inside like a pie. That was discovered about 4 or 5 years ago. I believe it's at the British Museum now. So there's a lot of text that's been covered and copied over into the biblical text. And I think that, in my personal opinion, a lot of people are just became a cargo cult, worshiping people that were masquerading as gods. I do believe in God, by the way. Let me make this clear. I believe in God. I believe there's a creator of the universe. I believe that the mathematics, the quantum physics all proves that. The fact that we're here. I believe this universe is imbued with a divine energy and a divine spark that lives inside of all of us. I just don't believe that the God of the Bible is truly the creator of the universe. I don't think that God needs money. I don't think that God needs
Sure. Do you mind if I just jump in here for a second? Because I think we've kind of gone on from the original question.
So let me, before Wes asks a question, because he asked them to summarize it, and he didn't, because summarize it, every single one of us look, if you've gone to school and asked to write a summary, you retell the story in your own words, shorter, so that your audience goes, what's going on? What Billy has done is essentially interpret the story. Like he talks about planets clashing into each other. He says Marduk is a planet. He says Tiamat is a planet. That's not what the text says. Now he's going to make a claim. I'm going to pull up the text. We're going to look at the Enuma Elish and we're going to see what it says. And whether it's verbatim, remember his claim, verbatim in the Bible steals from it. It's almost exactly the same. We're going to see whether it's almost exactly the same.
I appreciate that. I do have a few issues with your summary, although I think I have read
Wes
the
is so
Akkadian
nice.
version. My Akkadian's not great, but I sat down with a seriologist friend and we walked through it a couple of years ago. So I think that there are components of what you said that I would say are in there. I'm not sure it's the best summary. Nonetheless, okay, going with what you said that there were like verbatim parallels with the biblical creation story. Even just going off of what you said, which I think there are components of that I would agree with, the Battle of the Gods, the concept of Enki and the younger gods, and they fight Tiamat, and then Marduk, who swears he'll defeat Tiamat, and Kwenku, who kills Tiamat by shooting her with an arrow, and there's this big battle, and then the gods that die end up being the earth and the sky and even us, because we are the end result of that battle. I'm just curious, when you say that there are not just parallels, but there's actual copying, looking at Genesis chapter 1 and 2, where the creation story is summarized in the Bible, what are the actual kind of parallels there that you're looking to? Guys,
check out this response, you guys. What are the actual parallels? Because you said it's verbatim coded.
As
Yeah.
someone who's read both, I not only do I not find parallels, I actually, and this is the majority of ancient Near Eastern scholarship with me, think that Genesis chapter 1 is actually an apologetic against documents like Enuma. So what are the parallels there?
Separated the waters from the waters, for example. That's in the Enuma Elish, and that's also in the biblical text.
Okay, that I would agree.
Look, you can make a claim that the entire thing is copied, and then when you're asked about exactly what is copied, you said, "Oh, there's a separation of the waters from the waters." Come on, you got to do better than that.
Is a parallel. The only reason I highlight that is that if you're making this,
Okay, now here's what we're gonna do, because hey, that's what we do. People couldn't do this live, and so I'm gonna do this. We're gonna pull up the Enuma Elish, the Epic of Creation, translator L.W. King, from the 7 Tablets of Creation, London, 1902. A more complete e-text of the 7 Tablets of Creation is also available here. Hey, it's good to see you here on Apologia Center. This is a ministry that's there to provide you, the viewer, with content that's going to be informative for you, that you can learn from and apply into your life as you develop your worldview formation as a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you're more than welcome to be on this channel and maybe be challenged by some of the claims of Christianity and challenge us with your claims in a friendly, respectful way. I think this is a channel like no other on YouTube, frankly, because of the community we've developed. So if you want to be a part of this community, go ahead and hit the like button. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel. If you aren't subscribed, join us on Discord and jump onto our Patreon and just be a part of the community. Let's see if this tablet 1. We're not going to do all of it, but this is tablet 1. So the book of Genesis starts off with, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and void, right? And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God separates, and God creates this and that. Check this out. When in the height, heaven was not named, and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name. And the prime evil Apsu, who beget them, and chaos, Tiamat, the mother of them both, their waters were mingled together, and no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen, when of the gods none had been called into being. So notice that this creation is going to tell us about the creation of the gods. You don't get any of this in Genesis to say, oh, it's copied. And none had been called into being. None bore a name. None and no destinies were ordained. Then were created the gods in the midst of heaven. La and Lahamu were called into being. Ages increased. Then Ansar and Kisar were created, and over them long were the days. Then there came forth Anu, their son, Ansar and Anu, and the god Anu, Nudimud, who his fathers, his begetters, abounding in all wisdom. He was exceeding strong. He had no rival. Thus were established and were the great gods. But Tiamat and Apsu were still in confusion. They were troubled in disorder. Apru was not diminished in might, and Tiamat roared. She smote and their deeds, their way was evil. Then Apsu, the begetter of their gods, cried unto Mumu, his minister, and said unto him, O Mumu, thou minister, that rejoiced my spirit, come unto Tiamat, let us go. So they were. And so they went, and before Tiamat they lay down. They consulted on a plan with regard to the gods, their sons. Apsu opened his mouth and spake, and unto Tiamat, the glistening one, he addressed the word their way. By day, I cannot rest. I mean, I could go on, you guys. Right? So there's about 30 illegible lines. And it goes into, he spake, they had conquered, weepeth, seeth tribulation. What part of this is copied in Genesis 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7? And you can go all the way around. Which part? And that's why he can't give you which part, because he doesn't know. And he's going to tell you, oh, it's when the waters are separated from the waters. There's another thing he quotes, which is the Epic of Atrahasis. Let me pull that up. This is the Epic of Atrahasis. Does this sound like Genesis? When the gods, instead of man, did the work, bore the loads, the gods' loads was too great. The work too hard, the punishment too much. The great Anunnaki made the Lagigi, which is the evil-minded ones, carry the workload sevenfold. Anu, their father, was king. Their counselor, warrior Elil. Chamberlain was Ninurta. Their canal controller, Enugi. They took the box of lots, cast the lots, the gods made the division. Anu went up to the sky, and Elil took the earth for his people. The Anunnaki of the sky. The gods had to dig out canals, had to clear channels. The gods dug out the Tigris River, and they dug out the Euphrates in the deep. I mean, you can say, oh, look, in the deep. Oh man, Genesis copied this because it says God's spirit was hovering over the deep. Must be copied from the epic of Atrahasis. And I don't know what he's talking about when it comes to Mars being mentioned. The only Mars I can find in this text is this Mars, which is not Mars. There's one more he mentions, and that's the Epic of Gilgamesh. He talks about how in the Epic of Gilgamesh, this is a flood story. The flood story in the Epic of Gilgamesh. He says, you can have ChatGPT spit this out for you. He says, oh, they're told to create a disk. I think he's talking about a spaceship. This is an AI overview. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the boat built by Utnapishtim to survive a flood had the following features. Size. The boat was a giant cube, with each side measuring 120 cubits. The structure, the boat had 6 decks, divided into 9 compartments. The materials, it was sealed with pitch. The cargo, gold, silver, ale, beer, wine, many living animals. Launch, the boat was launched with great difficulty using a runway of poles. Talking about discs with a hole in the middle, these, planets coming into orbit and switching things onto their side. This is why I'm saying he was asked to summarize it. He didn't. He just gave us what he's been teaching to everyone, which has nothing to do with a summary of the actual text here. That's the problem with Billy, because Billy doesn't know these things well.
The argument, because if you brought it up, and I mean this with all due respect, there are superficial parallels. I would agree. The separation of the water, the concept of the earth being formless and void. That's also in the Enuma Elish. However, I think all the other details, it's the details that make the difference, and if we're looking at not the superficial crossovers, but the actual themes and concepts of what it's saying, you don't have a creation within 7 days.
The Bible's not going to take the Enuma Elish and put it into the biblical text. There are certain words that they utilize that let me know that they copied it from that text. Like, for example.
So it went from, it's almost entirely copied to there's certain words they use. And he says the waters from waters. And I just gave him one too, the deep.
Separating the water from the waters, the void, the earth being void. That information is literally just copied over. So it tells you that somebody saw that and said, let me add it to this book right here, or let me add it to the scripture or this papyrus. It wasn't a book yet at that time.
So was this text discovered that makes it parallel to Genesis? Was this?
Now Wes is going to go on to give some apologetic points here. And again, this has been believed by Christians for a very long time, that the Genesis account is a showcasing of how Yahweh is the great deity creator, and everything else, all the other people around that area are worshiping, are created deities. They shouldn't be worshipped. They're, as a matter of fact, created by Yahweh. They're part of the natural order of things, and nobody should be
discovered prior to the Bible, but it dates back long before the Bible was ever written.
Let me just say this. So the reason why I say it's actually an apologetic against that is because the purpose of the Enuma Elish, which the Babylonians read every Babylonian New Year, was to point out the fact that the deities, and there's countless deities in the Babylonian pantheon, they actually come from the created order. So they're not outside of time and space. They actually come from the created order. And when they die in this battle, right, when Tiamat is defeated, the defeated gods become the earth and the sky and the plants and even you and me. And in that sense, the theme is that you don't actually have any purpose or end result. And you're not created in the image of God. In fact, in the ancient Babylonian system, only the kings were created in the image of God. And what we see that is counter to that is that even, sure, there's superficial, divided the waters, but we find that in almost every society and culture. That's not a parallel as much as it's just a generality. I would say what we see within the biblical account is that God purposefully creates. There's only one God. He purposefully creates, and then he creates and it's good. And it continues to say it's good 7 times. And then at the end of chapter 1, just for, the thick people in the original audience, it says, and then it was very good. And then he creates humanity, not kings, but simply the humans that he creates in God's image. And they have purpose and meaning, and that instills them with this creation order. And that's not what we find in the Enuma Elish. In fact, we find the opposite in the Enuma Elish, is that the created order is not good, it's a mistake, and that you are not created in the image of God. And there's a reminder that regular people are not created in the image of God. So linguistically, Hebrew does have Semitic ties with Akkadian. It doesn't with Sumerian. Sumerian is a language isolate, a agglutinizing language. I would say, just with all due respect, the parallels linguistically are not there. There might be superficial kind of concepts that are there, but they're so superficial that we can find them in everything. In the sense of, I'm in an office studio, you're in your office studio. That doesn't mean that, you know, that we're the same people or we're even in the same place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't agree with that. I just see if I have all these texts out, there's a lot of different information that you can see. There's a lot of it's been copied word for word into the biblical text.
But what's the word for
Okay, why should we trust Billy Carson when every fact, the Sinai Bible, was discredited, and he actually told Wes, okay, I'll give you that one. You're right. The Gospel of Barnabas, forgery. Billy admitted, oh, it's a forgery. And then now he's talking about all these more ancient stuff, more complicated stuff, and then just disagreeing with the facts that are out there. We just read it. He made claims. It's copied. We just looked at the Enuma Elish. We looked at the Epic of Atrahasis. Did it look like it was copied? No. The problem is that people don't actually look at these texts. And those who do know that he's just blowing air.